Hello and welcome to Writers Ramble. My name is Michael,
And I'm Deanna.
and today we're going to be talking about characters that we like.
So we both happen to be writers. I'm more of a romance writer, but I also tend to like sci-fi genres as well.
I'm a bit of a fantasy writer myself. I like it for the world building, but I just kind of like anything that has a lot of good emotion to it. Just doesn't matter what genre as long as it gives you the feels in a way. Um not
So
like not like because of drama or anything per se, just like I don't know how to explain it. Maybe that makes me a bad writer.
you gotta touch a cold head, cold, your cold dead heart.
It's gotta make me feel something after I've been numb for so long. um so yeah, I think fantasy just kind of hits that for me because um as well as just having a lot of emotion, I feel like imagination is something that really resonates with me. So like the fantastical aspects of it that could never happen in real life just sort of set my neurons firing. I just like visualizing all the neat things and the crazy things that you can do with magic and whatnot. And then you like fangirling over cute scenarios, so you like romance.
I latched onto romance to help fill that dark void before I was ever in a relationship, and since then I just still like to see other people in love, even if they're not real. It just makes me feel things.
You feel this to such an extent that if ever there's a character who does not have someone else, you feel the need to be like, why don't they have anybody?
It's like when I was little with my teddy bears, I had to pair them all up so that they all had, you know, a partner. Because otherwise, that's
you
sad.
you did that with numbers too.
We don't talk about that.
Seven likes three, right?
Um, no, that's all wrong.
No. You see, seven likes five. Actually, you gotta get that right.
They don't even know each other hardly. Seven, it's not important.
Who cares about seven? Ugh.
We tend to have favorite characters. I've got a whole slew of them. Like, I've written about them and, like,
I have
ranked my favorite ones.
I have a select few. On the top of the list, from what I can think of off the top of my head, Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, because we've been watching that a lot. um, I like Charlie from The Perks of Being a Wallflower. If anyone's ever seen that, I feel like that's like less mainstream than other things.
No, I feel like it was pretty popular when it came out. Well, I mean, it was a book, of course, beforehand, but well, the movie came out 2012.
That
Yeah,
long
it makes me feel old.
ago.
That was like the
Here I
best
am,
year
an
of my
ancient
life.
22-year-old. I feel like I don't think of characters so much as I think of just things in general that I like.
Lamp.
Lamp? What?
You said just various things.
not, not, not like objects, like various uh, entertainment that I like, whether it's in book or movie or TV show form. Like I could tell you all sorts of things that I could like truly recommend in terms of like things that I've played as video games or like movies I've watched or books I've read. I could go on and on about that, but like the specific characters within them, like I'd be like, huh. And and then there's like certain characters that I relate to that I would highly recommend, and then there's like characters that I just think are good characters, which I don't necessarily relate to. Like Grunkle Stan from Gravity Falls, I really love as a character because he's like multidimensional
Spoiler
and
alert.
he's like a lot more interesting than you would think on the surface because he just looks like a plain old con man, but then you learn he's got this brother. But anyway, you find out all this stuff about him, and especially the episode "Not What He Seems" really gets you in the feels, and it makes you really like feel for him a whole lot. As a character, Gravity Falls is a great show. If you have not watched it, what is wrong with you? Go watch it right now. Anyway.
I liked Grenda.
Grenda is a good character in her own right. Very good as comic relief, apparently, for us. Uh, Weirdly enough, even though I never considered this before I watched it with you, uh, um, she's a very relatable character. I never been relatable to me because I'm not a girl, but I guess most girls, or at least you, just have a lot of similar thoughts to her.
Well, she's, a fangirl, and a lot of things she said, you know, I just related. It was like unfiltered thoughts, and I just felt all that.
Feel it in my soul.
Like what she said, it's Grenda time.
Oh man, yeah.
But I liked Dipper because I thought he was pretty relatable, and um, I felt so bad for him how he just was in love with Wendy, but she was, a lot older than him,
I
and
I really respect like the way that they went with that because realistically, I don't think he ever would have ended up with her, and the fact that they had him not end up with her is like not what you really expect going into it, just like based upon the tropes of the genre and stuff like that. But like it really didn't make sense for them to be together, so the fact that they didn't just kind of randomly end up together made a whole lot more sense. I've listened to a lot of interviews with Alex Hirsch, the creator of Gravity Falls, and I just really respect like the way that he goes about storytelling. A lot of it's kind of based on his own childhood, but he also like really thinks through character motivation and just like would a character honestly do this in this situation? Would it make sense in the story for this to happen? He really goes through it all and like hammers it out because he like wants the characters to be super believable and just like real in their own sense, which I can totally respect.
I think as for Dipper and his interest with Wendy. I mean, like, I feel like way down the line eventually, well, like when they're both adults, like they could be together, but of course it's a kid's show and they're not, they're not really paying too much attention to what's gonna happen later on in their lives, but they're just like, it's something that could happen, I guess.
Maybe something that I noticed watching Gravity Falls this time around, this recently we rewatched the entire series. Well, it was a rewatch for me. You watched it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But this would be my third time watching it, and I noticed a pattern I hadn't the first time, which is that Wendy goes through a lot of guys. So I don't know if she's just like. I don't think she'd probably be a bad girlfriend per se, but like she just seems like maybe the type to not be with one particular person for too terribly long for a variety of reasons. So I don't honestly know if Dipper would end up with her. I feel like he had an infatuation and the whole point of his relationship with her was to show that like um basically that's not always gonna necessarily work out and you kind of gotta like get over it, and it was sort of about getting over it but like still being friends and like sort of growing up in a way, learning that like life can be like that sometimes.
It really is like that, huh?
It do be like that though.
But who else was she with? I only remember her with Robbie
she
and
she didn't she like on screen wasn't with very many people. I think it was just Robbie, but like there were certain snippets during the show where she mentioned like exes. And there were quite a few she was listing at one point when she was talking to Mabel about something. She like kept going on about it while Mabel was doing something else. She was like counting them on her hands.
wow.
Yeah. So
I would say like, well, she's a teenager, but I mean, well, maybe I was a little late to the game, but like, I guess my first boyfriend, kind of. I was 15.
I mean, my first girlfriend, I was 16. Um, so I mean, I was.
Lame.
Oh yeah, you know what? I am pretty lame. You're right. um, where was I going with that? The one match that doesn't make a whole lot of sense on the surface, but makes a little bit more sense as I think about it more, especially as the characters mature later on. And this relationship was hinted at a little bit within the show. that makes actually a little bit more sense to me anyway for Dipper would be Pacifica.
I knew you were gonna say that.
She's definitely not good girlfriend material at the time of like the end of the show or anything like that, but she had definitely had a change of heart and they had a thing. And I think that makes a little bit more sense just considering their ages. And also, I don't know, Pacifica just doesn't seem like half a bad like character, toward the very end of it. And I don't know, like I feel like there's good chemistry in certain scenes, but then again, it was only ever really a thing in one episode, so I don't honestly know how well that would end up. I just think that'd be something interesting to explore.
Yeah. I kind of felt that in the one episode because he made a comment like, "Oh, she's not all that bad," and I was like, "Ah, yes." And now all the OTPs have
now,
formed.
now keys.
But as for other characters and stuff that we like, we got into Gravity Falls Ramble. I guess. I guess that's fitting for title Writers Ramble.
And there is the titular ramble. More on the way, trust me. Uh, what kind of characters do you like? Because I've rambled on about Gravity Falls for far too long at this point.
Well, you see, back when I was 14,
Back when I was a young lass of 14.
yeah, I drove all my friends and family insane from how often I brought up Eric from the Phantom of the Opera because I just wanted to roll him up in a blanket like a burrito and I don't know, like feed him ramen noodles or something. Because
No, you gotta give him a baguette. He's French.
oh right, my bad. A baguette and maybe some wine to drink away all that pain.
And apparently Totino's pizza rolls. Isn't that meme?
What?
Wasn't it pizza rolls?
Oh, oh. Oh, I feel stupid now. All those fangirls would be really upset with me, and you're the one that caught it. Yes, apparently he needs his pizza rolls.
I don't. It's so weird sometimes the memes that come out of certain like fandoms, like because memes in general I think are interesting because the thing that becomes popular about something, the thing that people latch onto, is never what you would expect, or is very rarely what you would expect, and
That's the
that kind of
beauty of it.
yeah, that kind of gives it like an interesting unpredictability that I, as a professional meme lord, enjoy.
Meme lord, but I'm the real fangirl here.
Yeah, let's rename the podcast to the meme lord and the fangirl.
I guess so.
um,
But I too dabble in memes. I'm
I dabble.
I'm fluent with memes and whatever fandom I've latched onto, whatever fandom has consumed my life.
Yeah, and that's where I'm less literate because I am the type of person that would just like notice I don't even know what you would call them, off-brand memes, just like things that wouldn't have to do with a specific fandom. It's just things you would find on the internet scrolling through. I'm a nomad searching the internet for dank memes.
You're just a casual scroller.
Yeah. I'm very casual in general in comparison to you in various aspects.
In high school, it was very common for me to be up at 3 in the morning. Well, I mean, that hasn't changed, but to be up at 3 in the morning alone in a dark room looking at all my favorite fandom memes and videos and giggling, and I went outside sometimes,
I usually stay up till 3 in the morning playing video games. I think that's something that we haven't touched on much. That is something that I'm very into, is video games. I think there can be really cool stories in video games as well. Although video games are just such an interesting format because of their interactability, where stories that do work very well in video games and I think are really cool, like just really good stories to me in video games, if there was done in another format, they just wouldn't be nearly as good, which is my personal conspiracy theory as to why there can never ever be a genuinely very good video game movie.
We can always hope that one day.
One day. I mean, we've gotten a half decent one with Sonic the Hedgehog, but I think most of the redeeming factors there was just the fact that they didn't go with the hellish abomination that was their first design.
Would you have watched? Would you have watched it
I
if they
think
kept the original? Um, what would you even call that?
design, not a,
I was trying to be more creative, like.
the the hellspawn that they summoned.
Yeah.
I actually was thinking like if they kept it, I was gonna watch it for like ironic purposes, just to like see how terrible it was.
So that you
Um,
could develop PTSD afterwards.
I literally did that with cats.
I was about to say you did torture yourself with that.
Cats is Cats is an experience. Like I wouldn't recommend bad movies in general, but I feel like everyone should just watch Cats so they can know what it's like to be on acid.
Wow. You know, sometimes some movies you go into it knowing it's going to be really awful, but you're just genuinely curious to know how bad it really is.
I
Um,
almost get like a um this like perverse glee going into it like I want to really be able to bash this thing into the ground.
I kind of feel like if I were, and I only know about this movie because being into Phantom of the Opera, like sometimes I began to watch one version in particular that's just really, really awful, and I stopped at only like 15 minutes in because I was like, what the hell did I just get myself into? But
She is of course referring to the Dario Argento version of Phantom of the Opera from the 90s. Uh s- Spoiler alert, there are rats involved. It gets weird. If you don't want to watch rats getting weird, I wouldn't recommend it.
oh man, all I can really say is lots of people will pick certain movies and be like, "Oh, this is the worst thing ever made," but it's like really not. But this I think might be actually one of the worst things ever made.
This.
And I read a
It's you know it's got good meme potential though. We've got our inside jokes about certain things,
yeah.
female smells and whatnot.
I can't take credit for that. That was another YouTuber.
Well, I mean, it was another YouTuber, but that does like I feel like you don't necessarily have to come up with a joke by yourself in order to like just continuously reference it until the end of time, which is like 80% of my humor.
Well, I'll give him credit. His name is Phantom Reviewer, and he reviews various Phantom of the Opera adaptations, and I think he does a good job with it. But yeah, I watched his reviews on that particular film, and there was so much that needed to be said that there was like probably like 10 different videos just to thoroughly discuss how awful the movie really was. And yeah, it's kind of made me curious to rewatch it, I guess, to torture myself.
You know, I think that there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in that one, but and I feel like 99% of anybody listening to this would not even know what I'm talking about, but there's a certain scene where they're on the rooftop of the opera house and there's this vision of a certain character and it's just strange and it sort of came out of nowhere at least from what I saw and it just like ended just as abruptly and it was just like one of those really good like WTF moments where it's just like did I really just see that? We're not gonna acknowledge that that happened. We're just moving on. Okay, okay, sure.
Are you talking about the seaweed dress?
This, oh, oh, that's what it was.
Or it might have been hair, no one's really sure.
Pulling a bayonet, I guess.
Maybe. Then, like, right after that, there was a weird. You know what? There's just too much that if we get into talking about this film, it'll never end. So we should move on.
All right, this ramble is over. Let's go on to the next one, I suppose. Um, but going back to what I was saying like a while ago, video games. I think that they can have really cool stories, but it's just very specific to the games themselves because you can't take that into another format and have it work nearly as well. For instance, one of my favorite stories in video games is Undertale, which is just one of my favorite games of all time anyway. Um, Specifically because like there's a lot of things that you can do in the game, just like various things you can interact with, and in other games it'd be called flavor text, and I guess it would be called flavor text in this one too. But it's so much more than that in this game because like it's very humorous, and like the way that the humor shines through just in like the very mundane, moment to moment interactions with objects is like one of my favorite parts of the game just because it has such style and like a specific and really good humor to it, that you just couldn't get the same thing from any other experience. And it constantly plays with your expectations. There are certain battles where like uh, what you would expect going into the battle is like a certain thing, and it manages to subvert your expectations even further. Um, you watched me play Undertale. Well, actually, you played it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
what the
forgot
heck?
about it.
How dare you?
And do you remember Lesser Dog?
This sounds familiar.
There's a certain encounter you can have with an enemy in Undertale called Lesser Dog, if you don't know about it already, um, where at some point you can pet the dog, and every time you pet the dog, for whatever random reason, his neck grows. But you can cause his neck to grow so far that it goes off screen, and then it comes back onto the screen, like to the right, and it just keeps like going back and forth up and down the screen until like the entire screen is just full of his neck. And like the dog gets like more and more excited every single time you pet him somehow. And like it's just things like that that make Undertale so good as a story. Like if I just read about something like that, it wouldn't have the same effect. But when you can interact with it, it suddenly becomes so funny and so good on like a personal level that you can't help but be charmed by it. And you really just couldn't do that with a movie or a TV show.
What you described reminded me, I think it was in Scary Movie 3. I could be wrong though, but it reminded me of. I forget what was even happening in the scene, but there was like a sheriff who had a hat, and like the brim of it kept getting wider each time the camera cut back to that character, but it was like kind of subtle at first until by the end of the scene they're like trying to get into their car and like their hat is so huge that they're like really struggling.
Oh man.
And I kind of forget about that sometimes, but when I do remember it, it's like really hilarious again.
Yes. And, for anyone growing up with Fairly Odd Parents, the version that I'm thinking of is Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadomes. Well, oh man, there's something so great about that gag where it's never mentioned, and it's not even consistent with Doug Dimmadome's character, but in certain episodes of the Fairly Odd Parents, Doug Dimmadome will show up, and the gag is that his hat is so tall that it goes off screen, and no matter what angle the camera is at, no matter where you're looking, when Doug Dimmadome is in the scene, you cannot see the top of his hat. There was even one episode, I believe, if I remember correctly, where they took a like really wide shot of Doug Dimmadome, and I think Timmy was next to him, and you could just like it was super wide, like the hat must have in this particular shot been like 200 feet tall, but like it just went in a straight line straight up into the air. You couldn't see the top of it. And that's just like, that's that like peak subtle humor that I appreciate where like it's never mentioned, it's obviously there, but like no one ever has to like explain the joke. You can just see it and you're like, why did this happen?
I feel like it's stuff like that. I bet the animators have a lot of fun working for, you know.
Yeah, for real.
um, I was kind of weird growing up as a kid. Well, you
Yes,
often
you were.
s-
I'm just kidding.
you often say I was never really a child. It's probably true, but when I was 10, I was kind of weird where I had two favorite movies. I loved Wall-E, and equally as much, I loved Pride and Prejudice. And most kids at that age, they didn't know what the hell Pride and Prejudice was. I was just an odd child, I guess. But
And here we see the dichotomy of man. Wally and Pride and Prejudice.
two most important things.
Perfectly balanced as all things should be.
Yeah. And I just always admired period piece films, I guess, because like Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre, and we were watching Downton Abbey, but we've kind of gotten distracted by other shows now. But we will finish that eventually.
Someday.
And I feel like I'm missing other period. Oh, I also grew up watching like Little House on the Prairie and like Little Women and all that stuff. So I just really love those types of stories.
Little House on the Prairie, Little Women, Little Mermaid, anything little, the little engine that could.
It's like Little Dick.
Little Dicky. uh,
um,
my favorite childhood story in general, I would say, would be a series of unfortunate events. Also, because it has a very unique charm to it. Um, I think that story was just very interesting to me as a child, and still is today, because of uh, like the way that the characters are portrayed in a way. It's such a like interesting uh, subversion of what you would expect of like the way adults and children are in the world as is, because there's a very like large emphasis throughout the series of the children, the Baudelaire children, are very resourceful, and they're doing everything in their power, and they're actually succeeding for the most part in keeping Count Olaf away from their money, which is sort of like the main thing about series of unfortunate events. That's like the plot for the entirety of the thing. Um, but normally, in a situation like that in real life, the police would get involved, authorities would be called, it would be taken care of. But there's such an interesting subversion role flipping in the world of a series of unfortunate events where, for whatever reason, every adult that they come across, or almost every adult that they come across, is practically by all means useless to them. They're oftentimes, because of the way that they think as adults, a lot more useless than the children are. And I think that's kind of like an interesting thing, because the children are seen as creative and resourceful and intelligent, and like they think outside the box because they're kids, and also they're just smart. But like the adults, they're like, it's almost like, because like you can sort of as an adult get stuck in certain rote ways of thinking, like for instance Mr. Poe, he he like refuses to allow the children to go to any good parents or anything like that, strictly because the rules of the society and the will stipulate that they have to go to the closest living relative. And when they ran out of closest living relatives, he went on some like crazy logic in order to end them up at like a windmill, and then a school, and then a village. It's kind of ridiculous the lengths that he went to follow the rules, but that just sort of shows the depths of his ineptitude, because he could have used his head, sort of thought outside the box, and got them to a good, loving parent, like Justice Strauss was for them in the first book. But rules are rules, and that's sort of like a theme throughout a series of unfortunate events. And I think that that's just rather interesting. And I don't know, you may have noticed a pattern, but I just like it when things are subverted in certain ways, but it has to be well executed, obviously.
that's another one. I'd have to, at the very least, like rewatch it Or at least what I watched when I was little was the one with Jim Carrey in it.
Yeah, you probably don't know much of what I'm talking about
No.
because you've only ever seen probably the worst interpretation of a series of unfortunate events because you never read the books. You saw the movie, which only covered the first four books. And granted, I do like Jim Carrey's performance, as I do with almost any Jim Carrey performance. But I'd say even the TV show, the Netflix TV show that came out in 2017, I believe, was a better interpretation, adaptation of the books than the movie ever was. Um, so, if you ever wanted to watch that sometime, we could watch that as well.
Yeah. I feel like I just tend to get introduced to things in the wrong ways. Like I watch the not so good versions, or
You got into Sonic with Sonic
we,
06.
yeah, that's something we can talk about another time. I was a kid, okay, leave me alone.
All right, here's
But
the Sonic games that you've played. You've
no,
played Sonic
this is a
06.
different topic.
Well, what else have you played? You played Sonic and the Secret Rings, right?
Yeah.
What else did you play?
Let's see. I know I've played other ones. Oh, just Shadow the Hedgehog.
Shadow the Hedgehog. So basically, like three of the worst, like most panned Sonic games are the ones that she actually enjoys and got her into Sonic as a fan. And she's never played Sonic Generations or Unleashed
I
or
did.
Adventure or Adventure 2. On any of the ones that like are objectively some of the best Sonic games, she just has not touched.
Excuse me, but there's a period where, like I was originally playing it on an Xbox, but then I didn't have access to an Xbox. Xbox. I did not have access to an Xbox anymore, and so there were a lot of different versions that I wanted to play, but I just could not get my hands on it, and then I was just like all sad and
Yeah, excuses.
oh whatever. I didn't have money to just
Sell
buy a
your
whole
organs.
I kind of feel like those are important.
You don't need both your kidneys.
Although with like a series of unfortunate events, like I also didn't read it because when I was a kid, I was really dumb when it came to reading, and I just wasn't very interested in it because I wanted romance. And when you really think about it, they don't really have romance. I messed up. When you really think about it, they don't have romance stories for kids. It's almost like they're like, oh, children, they don't have crushes or anything. They are incapable of wanting to be in a relationship or anything. What are feelings? And
Ironically enough, there is a pretty strong like uh sub romantic subplot in the series of unfortunate events, but that's like deeper into it. Like you'd have to read a few books in before you get to that point.
yeah, at that age, it would have been hard to get my attention. If I had to wait that long, I would have been like, oh, forget it. It's like, I want it here, I want it right now.
Call 877 cash now.
But yeah, I didn't get into reading until later when I was able to, like, when I realized that romance novels were even a thing. And then I was suddenly, you know, I became more of a bookworm. And it's funny because, like, I was writing before that point, but everything was just shit. And my spelling was atrocious. But then once I started actually reading, then wow, I got so much better. What a concept.
Wow. Let the record show that the book series that got you into reading was Twilight.
Oh, whatever.
I
I'm
just
not ashamed.
I know you're not ashamed. I'm ashamed for you.
You're just mean.
Yeah. I I'm not gonna get into why I don't super love Twilight. And by the way, you forced me to watch the Twilight movies, so I can tell you exactly why I don't like them now.
Okay. Well, good for you.
Now shut up.
I still like them.
That's nice. I'm not gonna say you shouldn't like them. I'm just saying I don't like them.
And I'm not saying, like, everything about Twilight is perfect, because, I mean, it has its flaws. Like, I think most things have flaws somewhere in there. But I feel like.
Unlike me, though.
But I feel like, Maybe I'm just more forgiving with flaws. Like, if something kind of weird happens, I'm more apt to be like, yeah, but everything else was really good, or I still appreciated it, so I'll let it slide. Except everything in the Dario Argento version is just pure awful, so don't watch it. Or, in other words, watch it for fun. But.
Watch it so you can make fun of it. Um, what was I gonna say? I feel like I am not critical of many things. Like when it comes to people in real life, when it comes to just like general situations, I'm pretty chill for the most part. But like when it comes to things that I'm passionate about, like writing, um, suddenly I get very critical, which that almost seems counterintuitive, but it's just because I care and like I want it to be good. And when it's not good, it's like, why aren't you good?
Well, that's just your opinion, though, if it's not good. So.
Yeah, except some things just aren't good, like Twilight.
Huh? You're just being mean.
I know, I'm just being. I'm playing.
Whatever. Um, what was I going to say?
I was gonna do that again. We can get some ASMR in here.
Huh?
We can get some ASMR in here.
And there you have my popping. Stop doing that.
I'm so sorry if you clicked off just now because that was the worst thing you've ever heard.
But if you are here, hey.
How's it going? How's it going, Craig? You looking good today, Craig? I love you, Craig.
Considering this is like the first video, people are just like, wow, this fucking sucks.
Or maybe they like this human element. Please watch more. We are humans. We are not robots. Beep boop. I mean, human noises.
Good job.
Thank you. I tried.
There was something else I felt like I was gonna mention with like writing stuff.
Well, I sure hope so because this is what the podcast is about.
You're just making me sound stupid.
I have that tendency.
Okay. Well, what about characters you do not like?
Characters I don't like. Didn't we talk about this already?
No.
Oh. Now you're making me seem stupid.
Well, it's not my problem.
Characters that I don't like. Characters that aren't fleshed out very well. Just like ones that, maybe they have importance to the plot, but they just don't get. They're not given the time and like the space that they need to actually grow as a character or anything like that. Or if they're just like very one note, like if they're defined mainly by like just one certain trait and nothing else, that just makes for a really bland character.
If I'm thinking about characters I'm not terribly fond of, one that comes to mind, a lot of people probably wouldn't like this, but I'm not a huge fan of Harley Quinn, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint what it is I don't like about her in particular. I think, frankly, she just kind of annoys me, if I'm being honest.
How does she annoy you?
She just does. I don't know, her personality, maybe it's just very vastly different from mine, like a polar opposite. I don't really relate with most any of the decisions that she made.
Well,
And granted, I'm going off of like Suicide Squad, so maybe I shouldn't be talking because I know that wasn't very well received at all. But
well, I was gonna say you don't necessarily need to relate to a character to like the character. So, in what other ways would you say maybe you don't like her? Like, is there any specific character quirk or whatever that you could point to that you could say like this is why this is why she just puts me off, if she's annoying, why is she annoying? If she's uh too different than you, what about the difference makes you say like I wouldn't ever do this thing and I don't like people that do this thing, so why do I dislike her?
and I mean, I do like characters that are different and interesting. I feel like in this case, maybe it's just me feeling kind of appalled with some of her decisions, and um, I mean, I feel like at least in Suicide Squad, she's portrayed to be, frankly, rather slutty, and I feel like another part of it, I felt like her whole character mostly was just eye candy in that movie, which I've heard people have complained about that. Like she should have more of a personality. I know in other cases they expand on her personality. Again, I'm going off of Suicide Squad in this case. But I think I also just don't understand her relationship with the Joker. It's like very blatantly abusive, and I guess I feel concerned whenever I hear of people romanticizing their relationship. Um, it's just so toxic and unhealthy, and I don't understand why. Whenever I'd hear, some girls would be like, "Oh, I want a relationship like Harley and the Joker," and it's like, why? Why would you want that? It's not a good situation to be in. So I feel like maybe that contributes to why I'm not a huge fan of her. It probably just comes down to the decisions that she was making. Um, I think that's probably a lot of it there.
Yeah, I can see that.
I just thought of Anakin for some reason. I thought of the I hate sand.
That's a good example of a character. That's not even a good example of like a bad character. That's a good example of a good character that like retroactively became a bad character because of what they did with the prequels.
But it's entertaining.
Sure, yeah, it's entertaining. You know,
You get a lot of memes out of it.
a
That's the
lot of memes.
that's the best part.
You know, lots of people hate on the prequels. Um, and I recently rewatched the prequels with you, and frankly, you know, and this is mostly in comparison to the sequel trilogy, I think that they're not too bad. At least in what they were going for, because they did succeed in doing what they wanted to do, which was give Darth Vader a cool backstory. Well, not a cool backstory, just give him a backstory. So I mean, they succeeded in doing so. They didn't make him cooler. They made him a lot worse. But I mean, they stuck with what they were trying to do. They had a vision for it, and they followed through. Which that doesn't always happen. So I admire that aspect of it. It could have been executed a lot better, but you know what? That's sort of an honorable mention where it's like it's not good, but it could have been way worse.
I think Padme should have just gone with Obi-Wan because he's the cooler one. But I know he can't. But he just would have been a better. He probably would have been a better boyfriend and daddy. But Anakin. Apparently, she looked at him and was like, "Oh yes, young meat."
Fresh meat.
The whiny one that
It's like, oh, you just turned 18, huh?
was he 18?
I don't know.
Find out he was like
16.
gross.
No matter how you slice it, no matter how old Anakin was when they married or whatever, she's still a cougar. Because she was like 15, 16 at least. And he was like 8 or 9 in the first movie.
I just think it's funny that he said really creepy things to her in the beginning of that second one, and at first she seemed a little disturbed by some of them. And then, when he was getting a lot more forward, which didn't take long at all, but she was like, "No, Annie, you can't think of me that way." And then the next scene, she comes in with her tits almost hanging out. It's like, "Oh no, Annie, you can't. We can't do this." It's like, what do you want?
Getting mixed signals here. Yeah, I can't quite place my finger on it. Maybe you would be able to more than me, but what exactly was so terribly weird about that relationship? Like, obviously, there was like the thing where she wasn't into it and then she was, but like, why? I personally, I think, would pin it mostly on the dialogue and just how awkward and stunted it felt. But what exactly was it with that relationship and just every scene that they had alone together that was like so bad?
Well, everything he said was really extra.
I could say the same about Eric.
Oh, you know what? You leave him out of this. um, I think what was I think what made it worse is that in the beginning she seemed responsible with kind of shutting down some of the things that he said. Like, no, this is inappropriate or whatever. And he just said just really weird things in general. Like opening starter conversations. It's like, oh, I hate sand. And it's like, that's great. Why are we talking about sand? But,
Yeah, yeah. I guess I would mostly blame it on the dialogue, like because I think I know what they were going for, right? Anakin was turning to the dark side, slowly but surely. He was saying some like edgy teen stuff, being an edgelord, but but they were simultaneously trying to develop the romance between him and Padme, and I just maybe the writers just didn't know how to go about that very well because by golly, they didn't succeed with that very much, now did they?
they're like, have you had a girlfriend? It's like, no, but I think this is how it goes. And, I think the one that was creepiest, from what I remember off the top of my head, like when he was saying like, oh, you haven't changed at all since I've last seen you, and I've like dreamt of you like every night since I've last seen you. And it's like, I don't
You have
think
no
any.
idea how many wet dreams I've had of you.
And I found that kind of odd because I feel like even whenever I had really crazy insane crushes, it's like I didn't dream of them every single night. I was like, maybe had a dream of them like every once, like every blue moon, but
Yeah,
every night.
yeah, and he mentioned that near the beginning, I believe, of the second one. So this was still the time where she reasonably was not into him. This was before the weird sudden change where she's just like totally into his dark, dumb teen edginess. But so yeah, like this was when she had a more realistic reaction. So he said that, and she was just like, "Oh, ha ha ha!" Like nervous laughter.
And for whatever reason, that didn't scare her away from the get go. I feel like, that was like one of the first things he said to her when he
Yeah,
saw her. And it's like, boy, you need to calm down.
and just to make the scene worse, Jar Jar Binks was there too.
I feel bad for Jar Jar Binks. He had to hear that.
Oh, Misa ears. Gonna go cut them off now.
uh,
You know,
and even Obi-Wan heard that. He was probably like, "Oh man, I have to pull him aside now and talk to him." And he probably wants to know like, "Why is my pee pee hard?"
Anakin, you're my Padawan. We can't have you, we can't have you salivating over our guests. Put your dick away.
It's like, but it's been so long since I've seen a walking vagina.
Oof.
Or, aka a lady.
That, children, is what we call a woman.
I'd get a lot of hate for saying that. I'm a girl, by the way, saying that, so.
She's allowed to. It's like, a black person with the N word. You can do that. I swear. I promise. I hope. Oh, yeah. This has been pointed out online a lot, so probably nothing new. However, um, Jar Jar Binks kind of is responsible for the Empire happening, if you think about it, because there's a scene, and I believe the third one, Padme was not representing Naboo for whatever reason. I think she was busy in another scene. So Jar Jar was filling in for her while Emperor Palpatine was making a speech. Well, he wasn't Emperor Palpatine at the time. He was just Chancellor Palpatine. But he was making a speech about how he's like, oh, I want to, make this republic into an empire and I can be the emperor and blah blah blah. I've been disfigured, etc., etc. And he's like, everyone, let's call for a vote. Who wants to make this an empire? And a lot of people raised their hands, and like Jar Jar raised his hand too. He was like totally into it.
It's all
And
his fault.
and like Palpatine gave like a really rousing speech. I might be getting this wrong. It might have been like a different speech, but he gave like a real rousing speech, and like it was very convincing apparently. But yeah, like Jar Jar totally like ruined the world. Wasn't his fault exactly in particular, but he didn't help. That's for sure.
He's like already, I think, like ranked the most hated character ever.
Yeah, that probably didn't help, did
Yeah.
it?
The real reason why he's hated. Never mind his annoying personality.
Yeah. I think the reason that people hate Jar Jar is like his existence in a Star Wars movie felt
Forced.
it was just so tonally different from like because Star Wars has comedy in it obviously. I think C3PO like was the OG comic relief. He existed in it. He's more or less just a comic relief character. He's not very useful.
He does useful things.
Very rarely he is
Oh, you
useful.
said C3PO, didn't you?
No, not R2D2. R2D2 is very useful.
Was,
C3PO is kind of useless.
for some reason, I was thinking R2D2, and I was like, don't talk shit about him.
No, C3PO is the useless one. R2D2 is, R2D2 is the one trying to get into the club, and he's totally allowed in because he's cool, and he's like, yo, C3PO is with me, and that's the only reason 3PO can get in.
C3PO is known as R2D2's friend.
Yeah, basically. So I mean, they wanted to have a comic relief character for the prequels. However, uh, they did it wrong. They just did it wrong. He's like a cartoon character in a movie franchise that tries to take itself pretty seriously. Especially the prequels try to take themselves arguably more seriously than the originals because like the whole thing is about Anakin turning to the dark side, so he's like slowly getting darker and more evil, and is supposed to get this like serious, sinister tone, and then like you cut to Jar Jar Binks going, "Misa hungry."
I
Misa gonna stick out my tongue and grab a fruit off the table.
I I think with Jar Jar, it felt like the comedy, like they were forcing it, like they were trying to be really funny, but you can like tell if people are forcing comedy, and then it's not funny.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that way. Um, Frankly, I feel that way with certain kids shows, and it was always hard for me to watch them. But you've introduced me to some that do it well, with comedy.
Going back to Gravity Falls, I think they do humor really, really well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was pleasantly surprised, but um, for the most part, I feel like I kind of steered away from a lot of kids' shows, especially the last 10, 15 years or so. I feel like they especially try really hard to be funny, and in doing so, it's just not as funny. At least that's my personal take on it. Um, but even when I was a kid, I watched a lot of Nickelodeon, but I was also weird because I just liked watching things that I wasn't supposed to really be watching at that age.
Yeah, like I said, you were not a child. This
Yeah.
is gonna be a consistent theme. If you say anything about your childhood, it's gonna be like, oh yeah, I watched Austin Powers at the age of 7.
My favorite character was Fat Bastard.
You see what I mean? I was watching like Veggie Tales.
Weak. And then I would like cross over to like Nickelodeon. Oh, I was normal in that sense watching Nickelodeon. I was like, yay, SpongeBob.
Yeah, but literally, who hasn't watched SpongeBob? Like, if you grew up as a child, around this time. Even nowadays, actually, I don't know. I feel like kids these days still are watching SpongeBob, but like, I
It's
don't know if
probably
it's gonna be as good, like
no.
for them, like if it's gonna be as memorable, or if it's just gonna blend in a bit more with all the other shows. Because earlier SpongeBob was just really something special, and I think that's one of the main reasons why it just has so much influence as it does nowadays. And maybe like SpongeBob's legacy is something that kids these days are going to latch on to, but like the current things that are airing, I don't think are going to I don't think they're just gonna have as much stick to itiveness as the old ones have.
Well, and also, like, SpongeBob has been going now for, like, 20 years.
Yeah.
And, well, I mean, you've talked about before, you don't like it when things go on for too long. It's like it reaches a point where it should end. And it's like, I agree, but at the same time, I'm enough of a fangirl where I'm always sad to see something end and I always want it to continue. It's like I always want it to just naturally have really good content, but realistically, you really can't have that. It's gotta end at some point.
Yeah. I am of the mentality where it's like, quit while you're ahead. Um, Not to say that you should quit earlier than it should end, but um, oftentimes I find that the ending of a show or a movie or whatever is often the best part. Think of like the scene in Avengers Endgame where all the heroes show up at once. Steve's like dying over there. He's practically the only one left standing, and then all the Avengers, they get those portals. It opens up. It's this big bombastic moment, and then they have this huge final battle, and then you know spoilers for Endgame if you haven't seen it. If you're one of the two people on Earth who haven't seen it, and Tony kills himself.
I was gonna say, it's like you should have said, spoiler warning sooner, but
I feel like even if you haven't watched Endgame again, if you're one of the two people left on Earth who have not watched Endgame at this point in the year of our Lord 2020, um, I feel like even if you haven't seen Endgame, seeing promotional material or even like watching the trailer would indicate like, oh yeah, like it's gonna be like a Smash Bros. Everybody is here type thing. Everyone's gonna show up at some point. So I mean, I don't think that's too much of a spoiler.
what's distressing to me is the idea that there are some people that haven't watched like any of the MCU movies, and it's like, what have you been doing? But I mean, they probably go outside and have normal lives. But yeah,
What is it? Tell me, normal people. What is it like? How is it? Is the air clear out there? I
Spe-
wouldn't know.
especially not now with the virus.
Through the mask, can you still smell the fresh air? Yay or nay?
Even my classes, like normally I would have left the house to go to my classes or go to work or whatever, but I'm just doing everything from home now, so that's been fun. And yeah, it's just been an interesting time.
Yeah. Well, on that rather anticlimactic note, I think we are reaching our natural conclusion here. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us on Writers Ramble. Is there anything you wanted to tell them that we may be talking about next week?
Hmm, probably more rambling.
I would imagine there will be rambling. It is in the title, after all.
We probably need to, I don't know, fix up how we're doing all this. People are probably listening and just like, what is this?
All right. If you guys want to leave any feedback in the comments, that would be much appreciated. Do you like the more chill style that we have going in this episode, or would you want something with a little bit more structure, less rambly? I know it's the title. We can change the title. It's the first episode. Go ahead and let us know. We will probably read all of them considering
We have no life.
we have no life. And on that note, adios.
Bye bye.